given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, today we are going to talk about a very serious topic, corruption. Now, more particular, today's topic is going to be talking about corruption as related to that undue familiarity with an inmate population. You know, so basically a staff member that's gone too close, whether they're bringing in contraband or having some level of relationship. It's going to be a great dialogue. I'm going to have Gary York on momentarily. He's a former prison inspector who has investigated these cases. So he's going to detail us, you know, what type of investigation has to happen, you know, basically what must be done by the inspector, what must be done by the agency, ultimately what's expected when this gets revealed. What do we expect from the inspectors? Now, guys, this show is brought to you by two sponsors, Guardian RFID. So from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. Also, if you guys are looking to pursue education, get that degree, bring experience into the classroom, go to American Military University. It's a great online college, and they're a big proponent of what we do in corrections. And guys, we need more people with experience in those classrooms. Gary, welcome back. What's going on, Gary?
Hey, Anthony, thank you for having me on the show. This is a very important topic, something that we need to be aware of and we need to take care of because the image of all our honest, hardworking officers and prison staff members is at stake here when we talk about undue familiarity with inmates, any type of corruption. We want to keep those honest folks' image strong and corrections image strong. So thank you for having me today.
Yeah, Gary, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yes, I'm Gary York, author of Corruption Behind Bars and my new book, The Toughest Job. And I have 28.8 years prison experience between the state prison and the county jails. 12 of those years, I was a prison inspector for the state of Florida. Those other years, I was on the floor working in the dorms and pods with the inmates. And I was lucky in my career to be able to move around and see some different things.
Hey, Gary, real quick. Now, I mentioned corruption, and a lot of times when people think about corruption, they're thinking about a dirty staff member who's either got that relationship with an inmate or bringing in contraband. But in your career, you've investigated different types of corruption. And I believe, even though at some point the corruption can relate to the inmate population, sometimes it's not directly affecting them. Do you know other corruption cases, real quick, just let people know that we're not, I mean, even though this dialogue is specific to undue familiarity, what other types of corruption can we find in our prison and jails?
Yes, it's not always directly with the inmates. We've had officers that have stolen things before, so we have to investigate that, having nothing to do with the inmate, maybe taking something from supply room or whatever. We've had some administrators who have had access to money, take money out of the inmate accounts, take money from some function that the agency is doing, you know, to help promote community relations, but they're taking some of that money out of there. We had a correctional secretary, our secretary of corrections, do 8 years in federal prison for embezzling money from the inmate canteen funds. We have had some jealousy cases where two male officers both like the same female officer, and we've had officers, unfortunately, for jealousy reasons, set up another officer for failure, and we've been able to prove that the poor officer who had false allegations made against him or her was set up by another staff member. So you can have a lot of investigations that don't even involve the inmates.
Yeah, and one thing you talk about stealing, I mean, sometimes, unfortunately, we may get staff that steals time, you know, that, you know, is using some form of leave and They're out there working another job or on vacation. Hey, Gary, so I want people to realize something. Some of the investigations that these inspectors do are not always known by the higher level administration. I want people to know that, right? Would you agree there are some investigations that you do that the administration will not be aware of?
Yes, I think a lot of people are under the belief that every warden and assistant warden or know about the investigations going on, and that's not true at all. I've had cases assigned to me by my Tampa office regional supervisor who had orders from Tallahassee saying, when you assign this investigation to a senior inspector, we're not going to inform anyone about this. You don't tell the inspector, don't go brief the warden, don't brief the assistant warden. That's not because of a trust issue. Has nothing to do with, oh, we don't trust the warden. We don't. It's just something that we feel needs to be investigated without anybody knowing so that we can properly investigate without anyone slightly ever having the chance of leaking the information. Not that they would. For example, we're going to go right back into this now, but staff inmate relationship. I might need some time as an inspector without anybody knowing about this case so that I can look at the phone records. I can look at the mail going in and out. I can listen to phone calls. There's things I have to do. I don't need anybody to know about it. We will brief the warden and the assistant warden and everybody as soon as we are able to.
Yeah, the reason why I wanted to mention that too is because I believe it also keeps things objective. I know that when investigations are done, basically the inspector is what's going to compile the evidence, obviously go through their chain of command, and then eventually, as long as there's no involvement from the administrator, they will be then given the evidence, and ultimately it will be them that will make the decision as to what we need to do with those individuals involved. Is that the process, Gary? Is that how that works?
Yes, exactly. And sometimes keeping the administration out is a favor to them. It helps them. I had a warden one time when I had an investigation say, there's no way she's doing this. She is an exemplary employee. And we uncovered some crazy things that she was doing with inmates and inmates' families and letters and tax returns. He was so shook up, but he was honest and he didn't interfere with the investigation. Thank goodness he was an honest man and he did not interfere with the investigation. Sometimes cases like that are better they don't know until it's over.
Right. Also, I believe that there may be certain things that have to be done to kind of collect that evidence that administration may not want to know about. I know in some cases here, sometimes there's a conflict because the investigator or the inspectors have to build their case, so they need evidence. But from the administration side, that evidence could be a conflict to our safety and security. So sometimes I know that the inspectors, as long as it's controlled, they may be knowing of certain things that are in direct violation, but they're collecting the evidence they need to push forward the case, correct?
Well, correct. Now, I remember always we were told, if you do anything in the investigation, we need to know about it, talking about the regional supervisor or Tallahassee, such as inmates wearing a wire or to talk to someone or anything that could jeopardize safety and security. If we knew of anything that could get somebody hurt, we had to stop it. I mean, we were told, you stop it immediately because we're not running the risk of somebody getting hurt just to get this case broke. We'll catch them later if we have to. That's number one. You never want to get anybody hurt on either side, the staff side or the inmate side. But sometimes we would be approved by the state attorney's office to put a wire on the inmate, and the inmate would go talk to the officer. This all had to be monitored very closely for everybody's safety, and a lot of safety precautions were put in place for this. And for this type of situation, we did have to have someone, such as a sergeant or lieutenant, aware of it. We had to have someone aware of it because they had to keep a close proximity eye on that inmate when he went to talk to that officer. some of these things we just cannot get away with having somebody there watching.
And
but yes, you're right.
I know it's a little different than the streets too, because in order for, I know in some cases, to seal that evidence, sometimes you need that exchange, whether it's, the person bringing in contraband, you may need that exchange between them and the inmate, but like you said, it's controlled, or proof that there is a relationship between these two, whether it's discovered through the wire that the person's wearing, or, unfortunately, hopefully we don't allow it to go too far, but maybe some cameras in a certain area that catches this relationship in the act.
Absolutely. We had information on a couple of cases. One in particular, that the female GED teacher is having sex with the inmate in the bathroom, and she's also doing things in her classroom that are unfavorable. So we waited till nighttime after the inmates were put down for lights out with our tech guys, and sometimes I would get assistance from the local sheriff's office, FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement. We would go in, and let me tell you, they're so small you can barely see them. Put in these pin cameras up in the classroom and pin cameras in the bathroom, and then we would know that the inmates are getting cash. Somehow they're getting cash smuggled in, paying her cash for favors. So we gave an inmate a wire and $80 cash, 4 $20 bills that we photocopied and knew the serial numbers on these bills. And we had a van outside the prison all day long watching her. And word of mouth was all we had. We can't get somebody out of their job for word of mouth. We can't prosecute somebody with word of mouth. Well, lo and behold, not only did bad things go on in the classroom, but we didn't get anything in the bathroom, but in the classroom, we got a lot. But the main thing we got was when she came out of the prison, I had a lieutenant and a sergeant female search her. They said, we found nothing on her. I said, check again, check everything, check the shoes, the bra for sewn compartments. In the heel of her shoe, they came out. Our 4 $20 bills were in the heel of her shoe. Now we have a case. Now she's arrested and goes off to jail. Word of mouth alone, folks, is no good. We're not prosecuting anybody or firing anybody for word of mouth.
Yeah, I was reading recently that when staff member brings in, let's say, drugs or tobacco or whatnot, they want to lessen it to a misdemeanor, but they don't realize that's what introduces the game. That's the leverage that the inmate takes to now get the bigger things.
Well, here's a good example. Now, drugs we couldn't allow to go inside the prison gate, but what we did is Officer Johnny meets inmate Jones' cousin at Hooters parking lot, and they exchange money and the drugs. We either bust them right on the spot, or in some cases, we let the officer take it all the way to the prison because they pick it up right before their shift. You try to do the pickup before the shift, and the officer's walking in through the first gate into the control room, master control, and we would stop them there, catch them with the drugs on them there. That's far enough to be introduction. Why did we stop them at the control room and not let them go on in to make the exchange? What if we lose those drugs somehow? What if those drugs accidentally get passed off to somebody else we didn't know was in the picture? We can't take that chance that those drugs enter that prison ground. So with drugs, things like that, we can't let it go into the prison. Money, those 4 $20 bills, we could do it with that.
What about tobacco?
We didn't let the tobacco go in also because, yes, tobacco is not as dangerous as drugs, but what if it got into another inmate's hands that's not involved in the investigation? I mean, I don't see a problem with letting the tobacco go through like the $20 bills, but hey, I had higher ups who I had to take orders from, and that's the way it was.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, like, again, you know better than I do. It's not as severe, and it'll give you that exchange that you need. Because I know that when you take these cases later on, usually the defense attorney will be like, the person had it on them accidentally. They forgot they had it on them, and
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think the best way to secure those cases are usually through that exchange. But if you could catch it off grounds, if you could catch them, meeting up with the families, I mean, you have the intent right there. The intent's right there. So I mean, that's good to know. Also, now when it comes to those developed relationships that happen behind the wall, sometimes I know that's something that you have to keep track of. I'm sure sometimes the inspectors, they get the kind of wind of it before anybody else does. But when it gets to somebody and you guys are already working the case, usually, especially if it's higher level management, let's say we get a phone call stating that we have a staff member that may be corrupted. Before we act on it, before we run and start, doing our own thing, which includes getting that person out, the first thing we should be doing is calling the investigative authority, correct?
Please let that be the first thing. Now, listen, I'm not sitting here trying to act like, oh, the IG needs to know first, but if you want us to properly investigate and have a chance at getting a dirty officer out of your prison, let us know what is going on first so that we can determine whether or not we need to investigate. Because if you rush in as an administrator and move this officer out of the dorm and grab this inmate and lock them up, well, we may not find anything. That inmate may not have anything in their property that we can connect to the officer. You may have just temporarily stopped a dirty officer from doing what they're doing, and now we have nothing we can do about it, and we'll have to wait till the next opportunity, and that's not good. We need to have a chance to look at it first.
Well, you need that leverage.
Yes.
Right, and you need that connection. Again, guys, the reason why we're mentioning this is because at the end, the defense attorneys, they'll get these corrupted staff to come up with many excuses that, kind of lessen the charge or lessen the intent. Because the investigator, not only do you got to get the evidence, but you also have to prove the intent, correct?
Correct. And we need the element of surprise. I should have said that a minute ago. We need the element of surprise without them being forewarned in any way whatsoever. Yeah, you don't have to tell them they're being investigated, but when you move them, they know something's up. So we need the element of surprise. We need the intent. We need to show intent was there. Tangible evidence is great. We talked about other evidence where we have cameras and money going in. Tangible evidence is great, where there's a love note, photos, anything like that is great to have to make the case even stronger. And those type of things will be found later at the end of the investigation. Why? Because that's when we search the officer's car when they come to the property, search the officer. We search the inmate. We search the inmate's property at the end of the investigation.
Right. And like recently we had the case of Tina Gonzalez where you had these relationships that were developed. Whether she came in aggressive, I don't know, or whether these relationships were developed, I apologize. Basically, it's not always a slam dunk case. Even though this turned out to be where she was found guilty, the sentence really wasn't that good. 7 months. And yeah, they didn't really do enough to deter there. But
2 years probation. 2 years probation is 7 months jail.
Yeah, well, it doesn't do nothing to deter. Someone said that, I was reading something where for the men, they question the consent. So if it's a male inmate and a female officer, they question the consent. Where if it's a male officer and female inmate, it goes right to the rape. And by the way, you can't consent if you're an inmate. But that was one of the things when they were talking to the male inmate, was this forced upon you or did you consent? Where I will guarantee you, even if they were asking of that to the female inmate, it doesn't matter. It's a male officer who has the power, I guess, to forcibly force that woman to have sex. So even if she did consent, it doesn't matter. But consent from an inmate based on PREA is non-existent. The law should be the same no matter if it's a male officer or a female officer. But in this case here, I also feel that the woman was very sloppy in her manner. I don't think she was trying to hide anything. It said at one point it was in view of 11 inmates. And then even after the case, she's still talking to the inmate, promoting their relationship. So maybe there is something not right with her. But I know as an investigator, I mean, you know, all because, as you said, there's a rumor mill going around that there's this relationship happening between the staff and the inmate. You still have to be able to prove that relationship. So it is a time of just collecting the evidence, you know, collecting something that establishes that, okay, these two are definitely on due. And that goes more than just the amount of time they spend with each other. I mean, that's crazy enough in itself, at least from our perspective. It's like, man, this officer and this inmate, man, they're spending a lot of time with each other. But that's not enough to take it to a grand jury. Remember, at the end of the day, you got to take this to a grand jury. So what are the things you need, Gary, to really build that case? And then when do you know it's ready to go? When do you know that you can go ahead and come after that dirty staff member?
Well, you're absolutely right. Number one, if they're just spending a lot of time with the inmate, and that's all that we see, even after our investigation is complete, then it needs to be turned over administratively, and the administration needs to decide, move that person out of that dorm, transfer the inmate, give the person remedial training, teach this person a little bit about inmate manipulation, or whatever you need to do with that person. But what I usually did is, if I had a phone recording, if I had a conversation between the officer and inmate, if I had a video between the officer and the inmate, yes, if later on I'll talk to witnesses, but you know, that is just witness testimony alone without any tangible evidence. If I have family members confirming, as I did in several cases, that the officer is getting phone calls from the jail. Okay, well, that's happened. Any of these pieces of evidence, if I have that together and I'm ready to go, now it's time to search the inmate and have the inmate and all his belongings. I like to have them brought up to a separate room, which is me and the inmate and all their property. And I would go down with the officers, and a lot of officers remember this, and we would all pack up his property together. You know, I didn't just stand there and do nothing. I got my hands dirty with the officers, and we would move it all back. And then the officer would stand outside, and me and the inmate are going through the property. It's unbelievable how many times you would find some tangible evidence, a picture, a love note, a letter. So now I've got the inmate taken care of. And then I would go and lay all my evidence out on a table up at the administration building next to the warden's office in a conference room, and have all the evidence laid out, and I'd bring the officer in. 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, when the officer sees the evidence right in front of them, they would either break down crying, drop their head in shame, and confess. Some of them would stick to their guns with the evidence in front of them, say, I did nothing, I don't know anything about this, you know. But that's when I would move in, after I collected all my evidence, at the very end.
Right, Gary. Now, the thing is, obviously, we definitely have the undue when you have that phone call that happens between the two, or a picture of that officer or some body part of that officer that could be identified in the inmate's possession. But if you feel that there's something bigger here, if you feel that, you know what, I don't want to just stop here, do you allow the relationship to continue so you can collect something that leads to the bigger picture?
No. If I've already proven the relationship is going on and I have all this evidence, most of the time we have to stop it. We have to stop it because we don't know what's next. Is she going to bring, is she or he going to bring a weapon in next time? You know, we have to stop it. But I have had a lot of spin-off cases. Sometimes one staff inmate relationship case has brought in 2 or 3 more investigations, and we will continue from there after removing these 2 from the situation. But, you know, we were always taught safety and security. We can't risk, now that we know what we know, we can't risk them bringing something in that could get somebody killed.
Right. And I know the separation is key, right? Because the moment you separate the inmate, let's say from the officer, you're looking hopefully to gain influence over that inmate, right? Because technically our focus is going to be on that inmate and having the inmate flip against the staff member, correct?
Correct. And I've always said many times, I just did a video today on my YouTube. I've said at the end, when the inmates are done with you, they will throw you to the wolves and throw you in the trash. I try to get that message out there. They're not going to keep you. They're not going to help you. They're not going to protect you.
Now, let me ask you a question. Now, believe it or not, the inmate is just as much a part of it as the staff member, but the staff member is someone we trusted. You know, we trusted them in this facility. We trusted them to, you know, have integrity with that position. You know, we trusted them to service that facility with honor and professionalism. But the key is the bigger threat to that facility is that staff member, correct? The corrupted staff member is a bigger threat to the facility than the inmate at that point, right? Because it's the staff member that has access to the outside world that could bring stuff in, correct?
Yes, you said it at the end. They're both dangerous to safety and security, of course, because the inmate's manipulating staff to get contraband in. But remember, just as you said, the staff member can go home. They have access to getting things, drugs. They have access to getting weapons. They have access to bringing the things in that the inmates want. So get rid of that outside threat first, who has access. And we need to work on that inmate, though. I've always begged every state attorney, let's prosecute the inmate as well. You'll hear a lot of officers say, it just makes me mad, though. Why does the inmate get transferred? He'll get a disciplinary report, but he won't get prosecuted, and the officer does. Well, because what's happening in these cases, folks, and that's out of my control. I would like to see the inmate get prosecuted. They need that inmate to testify on what he or she had part in, and they may give them lenience and to get the most dangerous threat, the outside threat.
Now, Gary, I want to mention something there. So let's say you have a developed relationship between staff and an inmate, right? And you do have that threat. The officer or the staff member has been corrupted. If there's someone else's testimony that you can lean on, is that a good way to hold both the inmate and the corrupted staff responsible? So if you're able to lean on a third party person. So right now, the only witness you got is the one person who's directly affected or probably pushing this corruption. But again, I need to get this officer out, this officer, the staff member's the bigger threat. So now I got to lean on this inmate who is the one responsible for the game, who's the one that corrupted the officer. But again, the officer, the staff member is the bigger threat here. But now, having said that, if there's another party involved that can help you get both of them, do you start shifting that to trying to get both?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. On those cases where we use an undercover to play the inmate's cousin or nephew or niece to deliver the drugs, we don't need the inmate anymore. We don't need him or her to say, oh, yes, we did this, because now we're going to prosecute the officer and the inmate for introduction of contraband, because we just did a full deal, a full circle deal. We also have those cases where we have staff witnesses. Officer so-and-so saw these two doing this. Officer so-and-so, and we had this happen many times, saw an exchange between an officer and an inmate. Inmate was searched later and he had cigarettes, or she had cigarettes or drugs. When we have those kind of cases, the heck with that inmate. We do get both prosecuted at the same time. There's other examples, and I'm glad you asked that question, because there are many times when we do prosecute both for the same crime, and the heck with it. We don't worry about how are we going to get this officer prosecuted.
Now, when it comes to relationship, Gary, 100% correct with the inmate's got nothing to lose. If that's all it is, it's just a relationship. The officer or the staff member has a lot to lose, because now it's a violation of PREA, violation of their position of authority, their position of trust, and they should face some level of jail time, amongst other things. But the contraband is where it kind of comes up in the air. Okay, so you got the staff member, let's say, bringing in the contraband, because most likely that's what the relationship is going to get to. It's going to get to, bring this in for me, bring that bring this in for me, bring that in for me. You know, that's kind of where the inmate gets that level of control over that relationship, and then they start requesting for that contraband, and not only requesting for it, they probably tell the staff member how to maneuver, how to get it in. I mean, pretty much they plan most of it, and the staff member just, okay, because I trust this inmate now because we're in this relationship and I know they're not going to turn me in. So the funny thing is the contraband that you're now bringing over to the inmate is the leverage that the investigators are going to use to establish the relationship that you're having with that inmate. So the moment you have this relationship and you think things are going good, and then the inmate asks you for the contraband, you now are the one that is giving the inmate the power now to go ahead and say, I got you. Because when the investigators come in, I mean, they may have trouble establishing that relationship. Like Gary said, a lot of it's word of mouth. We can't run with that. But we could run with some contraband that you shouldn't have that doesn't come through the proper channels of the facility. So once they get something, even if it's just a Burger King ketchup packet, I don't care. Whatever it is, it's something that did not come through the proper channels that begins that discussion of how did you get this? Correct, Gary? Is this how it all starts?
Correct. It all starts with the small stuff. The inmates aren't going to jump right into the big stuff, the cocaine, the marijuana, the methamphetamine. They're going to start out with food, cigarettes, gum. But once they know you're into that and you're bringing that to them constantly, then they'll move in. And it's funny what you said, the control they'll take over an officer. How can an officer allow this type of control to be taken over? That, you know, to where they're using three-way phone calls. And we've had officers on a three-way call, and the officer's not saying anything except yes, yes. The inmate is describing exactly how you're going to pack this contraband, exactly how you're going to bring it in. And because of the phone call, there we are waiting. And lots of times it's code words now, folks. They're not just saying marijuana. And it's a lot of code words that they're using on the phone call, thinking they're getting away with something. Also thinking with 1,200 inmates, the odds of this call being picked up are small, but we have ways to pick those calls up. Anyway, how can you allow an inmate to just take over your life and demand how you're going to pack this stuff and bring it in? It's crazy.
Well, that to me is the moment. I mean, these staff members sometimes may think they are in control. Again, we talked about female staff members, maybe a little different because maybe they're willing to give up that level of control to an inmate because they believe that the male inmate can provide them some level of safety and security, and ultimately there's a trust exchange. But I for male officers or male staff members, I don't see them looking for that inmate's protection. Actually, I believe that the male staff kind of have that perception of authority because the female inmate allows them to have that. The moment you start to see that staff member scramble is when you separate the two. Now you're no longer in direct control of that inmate manipulation Decoded. Yeah, now available on Amazon. Ahead,
Please read chapter 7. This is exactly what Anthony is talking about. Oh, it's his book also, Inmate Manipulation Decoded, which goes, I've always said to Anthony, you know, inmate manipulation and corruption issues, they're together, they're tied together. But chapter 7 is great because he tells you how the male officers can differ from the female officers when inmates are manipulating them. I had to do it, Anthony, because what you're talking about is right on the money here.
Well, yeah, thank you, Gary. I forget. And by the way, Gary's got his new book out in the market. Gary, what's your new book called?
Oh, people think we had this set up and we didn't. I had this.
There it is.
The Toughest Job. Today is day number 8. It's still number 1 new release in its category, folks. Not all books. There's 8 million books out there. The Toughest Job talks about exactly what it says. All the things correctional officers have to go through and do from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it. I did order it, and then I'll put my review up. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing review. But going back,
I didn't plan that, Anthony, but that topic you were on is in chapter 7 of your book.
Yeah, I know, but it's great to see that because I love when you write something and it can be applied. I mean, the key here is I don't see male staff given that level of control. They're going to want to have that perception of authority, which I believe the female inmates give them that. Now, once you're in there and you separate them both, now you start to see that Mr. Confident officer start to shift because now there's another chance for another influence. And most likely, they'll get that female to turn, correct? I mean, do you see a change in that officer's demeanor when there is a separation between the two? And real quick, guys, before you answer that, nothing's 100%, guys, so bear with me. One separation when it comes to the male inmate and the female, the male staff member and the female inmate is that perception of control. I think for the female staff member and the male inmate, there could be some strong ties to that relationship, to where the female winds up sacrificing everything for that inmate, where I think the male is a little bit different. They're trying to get back that level of control, where the female inmate may be chasing, or the female staff member may be chasing that relationship, and at that point, it's a done deal. But that separation of staff, the corrupted staff to the inmate, is key to that investigation. Correct, Gary?
Correct. And what happens when you get to that final stage and you say, okay, now we're ready to bring the inmate in and transfer the inmate. Sometimes I didn't interview the officer, whether it be male or female, that same day. I would finish with the inmate and the property. I wouldn't leave the institution until they were on the transfer bus and shipped out. And then you leave it alone for a couple of days. And the inmate's gone, and you see this officer start to get in that panic mode. And sometimes they'll even slip up and give you more evidence for the case, make more phone calls, and things like that. And then I'd go back 24 hours, 48 hours later and interview the officer. But you're absolutely right. Separation of corrupt staff and inmate is essential in a number of ways.
Yeah, because again, it also gives a different influence to where the investigator is going to target, because most likely the investigator is going to target that inmate to get the information they need to pursue their case. One last thing, Gary, just out of curiosity. Now, you have the relationship between the corrupt staff and the inmate, but then you also have the results of that relationship, right? Which could be the contraband. I mean, we kind of touched on this before, but I just want to ask again, are we chasing after that relationship and basically all we have is a developed relationship, or do we want that end result to make sure that we have enough to make sure this person's properly punished, because we don't want them working in another correctional facility again, correct? I mean, relationships, if I can't prove anything sexual, it's just a very close relationship, the outcome is key. Well, what's the benefit? How is the inmate benefiting from this relationship? How is the corrupted staff member benefiting from this relationship? So ultimately, are you looking for how both parties are benefiting from this relationship?
Absolutely. And when you write your report, that needs to be in there. The state attorneys love it when you can show officer benefited in this way, in this manner. There's another charge for that, using your official position of duty to gain a benefit. There's other charges that go along with these things. Show what the inmate, how he or she benefited from all this. Listen, I've always said, when you do an investigation, try to do it thorough from beginning to end. If nothing is there, folks. Don't force it in there, and don't try to make something of nothing. But when the evidence, if the evidence is there, it's going to start to fall, and one piece will fall in, another will fall in, and then it'll all start to come together. So it's very beneficial to do a thorough investigation. I have had staff members tell me, man, so-and-so got away with that one. That guy or that girl, didn't investigate very good. And, hey, folks, we have hard workers on the line. We have hard workers in administration. We have hard workers in the inspector's office. But, hey, we also have some that can be lazy. Okay, that's just a fact of life. It's how good you do the investigation.
Yeah, I think also sometimes when there's a relationship that exists between the two, but it's getting hard to get that evidence, you still got a risk. That risk is that relationship between the two. So you may have to act out just to get that person out, because again, that person poses a threat. And at that point, I'm sorry, we couldn't get the evidence we need to get something criminal. But in the meantime, this relationship was, it was getting so involved. We just couldn't wait for the evidence. We had to get this person removed or transferred. Has that ever been the case?
Absolutely. Sometimes, now, to be safer than sorry, folks, we'll move the inmate no matter what the outcome, because that's just to be safer than sorry. Whether the allegation's unsubstantiated or not, let's just get the inmate out of there. Because now what's happened, as you know, Anthony, once an investigation is over, staff members will find out there was an investigation. And, they'll say, why is that inmate still here? It could be a problem. And it can be. They're right. They're absolutely right.
Retaliation.
Yes. So the staff members are right when they ask the question, why is that inmate still here? All kinds of things can come up. And retaliation is one of them, Anthony.
Yeah. So, guys, it was just a quick discussion. There's a lot of things we covered here. But in the end, like Gary said, there's going to be 3 results: substantiated, unsubstantiated, or unfounded. Unfounded means the allegation against the staff member is completely bogus and there's evidence to prove against the allegation. Unsubstantiated mean, well, not at this time, we can't prove it. It can go either way. But usually you do give the benefit to the sworn professional, if that's the case, unless there's reasons not to. And then the other thing would be substantiated, where now that person's in a world of shit because evidence has been collected. But again, you're looking for that evidence. So if you have that relationship and there is some reason where that relationship developed into something physical, well, now you got the PREA violation. That's enough to push for something criminal. But sometimes, all because you have this officer and this inmate or the staff inmate talking all the time, it may not be enough for the investigators to pursue, because it's like, okay, we know something's up, but that's not enough. We need more. So now you start to see, like, maybe the investigators kind of keeping their eye on this individual, keeping their eye on this relationship. But if it gets to the point where they can't get nothing, but they know that there's something up, I like what Gary said, then move the inmate. If that staff member comes back and wants that inmate back in their area, well, that's going to open up a whole world of shit for that staff member, But again, move the inmate. At the end of the day, it's just an inmate. Move the inmate somewhere else and alleviate that influence that the staff member has on the inmate. What's your thoughts on that, Gary?
No, I agree with you 100%. I just wanted to throw in, I didn't mean, sometimes we move the inmate and lo and behold, a month later, we get a call from an institution up in North Florida saying, you've got an officer from South Florida coming up here visiting an inmate. They'll go up and actually visit the inmate sometimes. That's how crazy it can be.
I will guarantee you, the moment that staff member goes to visit that inmate and the investigative authorities can prove that the relationship between this staff member and this inmate evolved during the inmate's stay under that staff member's supervision, that staff member's in a lot of trouble. 100%. Now, sometimes, again, you could have family or something like that. We get that. We're talking about the relationships that develop behind the wall. That's key. So, again, one of the investigations or one of the things that the investigators have to prove is where that relationship developed. And even if there was something prior, before that inmate went into the system, did the staff member report it? Did they put it on paper that they knew this inmate? That, they were friends on the streets or they dated? Because at that point, we're going to go back and still get that staff member because you should have reported that, because now there's a conflict in your duty. You are not able to be objective with that inmate because of your past relations. So sometimes you have what developed in the prison or what could have developed on the outside that you failed to report. And then obviously we as management have to do what we can to alleviate that conflict. Hey, Gary, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Hey, everybody, to all you honest, hardworking officers, stay safe. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for your service. If you see anything going bad, corruption in any way, please report it. It's our duty. Let's get rid of these people that are tainting our image. Thank you.
Yes, guys, the rule of thumb is see something, say something. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Again, guys, for the people on the outside looking in, this is only a small fraction of who we are. 99% of us are professional and do what's expected of us, but you always have that 1%. And I want to tell you something, that 99% want that 1% out. So it's good to have a dialogue like this to kind of give you an understanding of what the process is when you have someone becoming a little undue with an inmate. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.